Pastor Bob came to me a little under a month ago and was just kind of like, I think I want you to preach about what is on your mind. What's going on? What are some thoughts that you would like to talk about instead of continuing? Yeah, if you want, yeah, that'd be great. Instead of continue on with our series, so we're actually going to be going a little bit off of Leviticus. So some of you guys are like, whew, and some of you guys are like, I was getting so good. But today we're going to be going a little bit off. But as you will notice when we go through Leviticus and what we'll be talking about today, there's actually a huge shift that happens between the relationship that God had with us in the Old Testament versus it is right now, and it is going to become more personal, as you will find out. We don't have to go through as many hoops and sacrifices and all these things, and God opens that up to us, and that's what's really awesome. But before we get into that, some of you guys who haven't been here very long are like, who is this guy? I'm not Pastor Bob. If you guys were expecting that, I'm not him. If you guys weren't in here when we were doing announcements, he is on a much-needed vacation with his family to turn his brain off and just be able to live life with his family. And so that's super awesome for him to be able to have that opportunity. I am Pastor Marcus. I work with the 0s to 18. So I sometimes, during these weeks, you might see me running around the hallways acting like an airplane. That's normal. It's just what I do. My wife would ask me to stop, but I do it anyway. And so, but first off, I just wanted to give a small story about me. One time, Kelsey and I, we had been dating about 3.5 years. We were running around on a spring break about this time. Spring break vacation to see family, her side of the family. There's some medical things going on with her family. Wanted to just kind of be with them and also enjoy life together. We had never been on a trip with just us two. We weren't married yet, so we always made sure there was parents around and always made sure there were adults. And we traveled to Minnesota and then also came back to Michigan, and we went to Chicago. We were hanging out in Chicago, and lo and behold, Kelsey knew I would probably be asking her parents for permission to marry her during this trip, but she didn't know I was going to also ask her. And so you would expect that there's this awesome thing that's going to happen where we're in Chicago, we're at the Chicago Zoo, and her favorite animals are over there, and there's people everywhere. No, I didn't propose to her there because I don't want to be flashy. I wanted Kelsey to be proposed to after a regular day. Some of you guys are like, that sounds really boring. But in my mind, I was like, these are the real days. These are the days that we might have on a regular basis. So what did I do? I took her out to dinner. We went to see a movie, and then I played our song, Stereo Hearts, and we drove back to her place, and I proposed, got down on one knee on her doorstep. And I thought for me that's I love that because it's what I want us to be able to do. I'm not going to be able to take her to 5-star restaurants all the time. I'm not going to be able to do all that. But these are everyday moments. But to wrap this story up, the thing that you have to remember is at the very beginning of the day, my mother wrote me and she said, you know what day this is, right? The day I proposed. She's like, it's April 1st. So this is me after I proposed to Kelsey on April Fool's Day. Luckily, none of us have looked at each other in our almost, how many years of marriage now? This was a decade ago, almost 8 years of marriage. 9 years of marriage. But this was almost a decade ago that I proposed to Kelsey, and luckily none of us have looked at each other and said April Fools yet. We don't know if this is the longest going joke. We have no idea, but we'll find out. But what does this have to do with what we're talking about today? Maybe nothing. Maybe we can make a connection, but I also wanted you to just hear a little bit about me and my wife. But we're talking about relationship today. And what better way to do that than go into an amazing story with just Jesus and our relationship with him. And so I have an opportunity, luckily, to work with nursery and kids church and youth group, and I get to hear and see all sorts of different stories. So I actually almost sort of stole this one, believe it or not, from kids church. So you're going to hear a little bit of some lessons that your kids might have heard about 3-4 weeks ago, and that is the story of Mary and Martha. And they talked about time. What do you use your time for? What are you spending your time for? They were all given 24 balls, and they're asked to go through their day and put one away. Put one away. What do you spend your time doing? Oh, I do this for the day. I run around. I play games. I go to school for this long. And we slowly just took these out of the cup. And after a while, I found out that your kids, for some reason, only have about 2 hours to sleep. I don't know, so there might have been some error in what they thought they did with their life, but they only sleep 2 hours, and I don't know how they're sleeping and spending time with God, but that was the idea, was that you need to see what you're doing with your life and find a place to put God. So as we're going through this, I want you guys to kind of think that through. So what we're going to do is I've already broken it to you. We're going to open up to Mary and Martha. And so if you guys wouldn't mind, open up to Luke 10, 38 through 42. You guys can also follow on the screens, but you are more than welcome to pull it up. I pulled out my bookmark, so it's going to take me a second, sorry. Also, for any of the youth that hear me too often, it's between Genesis and Revelation if you're having trouble finding it. All right, here we go. So Mary and Martha, we're going to read it, and then we're going to break it down afterwards. Now as they went on their way, Jesus entered a village, and a woman named Martha welcomed him into her house. And she had a sister called Mary, who sat at the Lord's feet and listened to his teaching. But Martha was distracted with much serving. And she went up to him and said, "Lord, do you not care that my sister left me to serve alone? Tell her to help me." But the Lord answered her, "Martha, Martha, you are anxious and troubled about many things. But one thing is necessary. Mary has chosen the good portion, which will not be taken from her." Now let me set the stage. A lot of us, when we read this, we think, all right, Jesus is in the house. Remember, before this, Jesus has done a lot of stuff. He has turned tiny little fish and loaves of bread to feed thousands. He has done other healings. He has also upset the balance of what the Jewish culture had been doing for hundreds of years. This guy is coming to your house. That's intimidating in and of itself. And then you add, wait. Now, as they went on their way, he traveled with people. He traveled with what we always hear as the apostles, the 12 apostles. But then if you also break it down even further, as you read, sometimes you find out that there were even more than just those guys following. So we technically don't know how many people Martha was preparing or cooking or getting her house ready for. And I'm thinking, if I have 13 people in my house already, that's enough. Like, that in and of itself, I know for a fact, if we're having 13 people, Kelsey has already made me clean up the house 2 weeks prior, and then we're cleaning again the day before. And so now, for anybody who has a bunch of boys, it's 13 boys. It's a lot of people and a lot of food and lots of the time people believe that they could have been 16 to about 30 years old, the disciples. So, and they're brothers and they're rowdy and there's a lot of stuff going on in this house. So Martha, gotta cut her some slack. There's a lot going on in her life. And then, as we all know, she's human. If you've ever prepared for anyone coming to your home, there's other stuff probably going on in your life. You're doing other things. It's not the only thing you're worried about. It might not just be the people coming to her house that she's frustrated and trying to get everything done, let alone Mary not helping. And so I just wanted to set that mind that it's not just possibly, and even if it was just Jesus, he's a big figure in the day. That's a lot of stress going in. And so I just wanted to set the stage real quick so you guys remember that as we go into more about Martha. She's been cooking all day. She has all these men that are coming to her house, and possibly even more than 13, maybe one, maybe 13, maybe even more. And so here we go. Now we're going to go to verse 39. And she had welcomed him into her house, and she had a sister called Mary, who sat at the Lord's feet and listened to his teaching. But Martha was distracted with much serving, and went up to him and said, Lord, Lord, do you not care that my sister has left me alone? Tell her then to help me. How about you guys? But I don't think I would turn to Jason if he's over at my house and go, can you tell Kelsey to help me clean up this house? I think that's kind of a low blow to like, I feel like that she's hurting. Like Martha's in a bad place if she's going to her guest telling Mary to get moving, right? So she's having a rough time. And Jesus knows it. His next words are Martha, Martha. And when I've looked into this, because I was like, hey, Martha says the name twice. Let's look at this. Anytime that I've been able to find that Jesus uses a name twice, it's compassionate. He turns to Abraham when he's about to kill his son on an altar, and before he brings down the blade, he says, Abraham, Abraham. When he turns to Moses, after he's been in exile from his family, everything he's known, and taken away from Egypt, he goes right before he gets to stand on holy ground in front of the holy bush, God says, Moses, Moses. Before Samuel is called, right when Samuel is called and brought into the full time of being the voice of God for God's people, he says, Samuel, Samuel. God is a compassionate God, and Jesus looks at these people and knows what's going on in their life. And so think about this story when you are I'm going through a lot of stuff. I'm going through crazy things. It could be financial, it could be illnesses, it could be moving, it could be stubbing your toe this morning, honestly. We don't know what you're going through. You're the only one that knows what you're going through. Put your name in there. Jolene, Jolene. Kelsey, Kelsey. Bill, Bill. God is calling out your name in compassion because he knows that you're going through a lot. But it doesn't end there because he then tells her something to change. Verse 42. But one thing is necessary. Mary has chosen the good portion, which will not be taken from her. So Jesus is talking about right here is relationship and eternity. If you didn't catch that, let's read that again. Mary has chosen the good portion, which will not be taken away from her. The good portion is what Mary was doing. Her actions was listening and sitting at Jesus' feet. And that's what God wants from you. You might be going through more than anyone knows right now. You might have just, like I mentioned, stubbed your toe. Maybe you only have a lot of dirty dishes, right? Maybe there's just a lot of just stuff at your house that's overwhelming, and you might have a couple, and that's okay, right? We all fight our own battles, and dirty dishes might be the tipping point. And you might have things going a whole lot more than anyone else knows. And God says, Martha, Martha, I get it. I get what you're going through. But what you need to do in all of this stuff, all of your anxiety, all of your frustrations, you need to listen. And you need to sit at Jesus' feet. That's hard to do sometimes, especially when you're going through stuff. Because things got to get done, right? You're sitting there going, I have to get this done. I have to go through this. I have to hit this head on. But God's saying you need to sit down and listen. You need to be with me. Be as close to me as you can, like Mary was, at his feet. The next bit, at the end of that verse, it says, which will not be taken from her. Your pain, your agony, your anxiousness, your dishes, your all of these things are temporary. This is, I was looking into this, and there was a pastor who brought this up wonderfully. He had a graph, and I'm not awesome at technology, so you get me pointing. He drew a line that way and this way, and he put a dot right here. And he said, this is eternity. It goes forever that way. Before, and we don't understand this as humans. We don't get it. But it goes forever that way and forever this way, and we're right here. Martha is worried about the right here. Martha's worried about the speck in the thousands and millions and billions of years of eternity. And God says that Mary listening and pouring her life into Jesus is what matters for the rest of the timeline. There's a lot of stuff that we have to worry about right here, right? There's a lot of things that go on and are troublesome and worrisome, but if we don't sit down at Jesus' feet, if we don't listen to him and think about how that affects the future, how that affects others, and we need to be no longer worried about the stuff that happens here, but the stuff that will happen because we sat down and listened, because that will last forever. So, I know it's a lot. I know I might have repeated myself 100 times, but I really want you guys to understand this. And the fact that, I'm just going to say it, life can suck. It can be the worst. But you need to also realize that Christ is the only thing that matters. If you don't have him, there is none of this that's good. There's none of it that's good. But if you follow him, there is paradise and there is so much more love for the rest of eternity. It's a lot for me right now, actually, because some of you guys know, some of you guys will find out later, there's a lot of stuff that goes on in some people's lives that you don't know. And the most important thing is Christ's love. So I'm short, not just physically, but I'm short in my messages. And today I'm actually going to change things up and only do one action point. So sorry. So some of the worship team's like, what? I'm not even prepared. I'm so sorry. We're only doing one. I'll drag it out a little bit for you guys. But it's only one act. You guys can come up. You're allowed. I'm so sorry. Usually you have like two to mentally prepare. Make Christ your center. That's it. It's a lot, actually. It's actually a lot. And if you don't necessarily know how to do that, because you're like, I have not just maybe agony, not necessarily baggage, not necessarily all this other stuff going on, but I have things that take up my life. I have dishes. I have to take my kids to school. I have all these things. This is the one thing I will challenge you to do, and this is the hardest part, is don't fit God in your hectic schedule. Put God first and fit your hectic schedule around God. God has to be first. You can't just put him on the back burner and try to fit 10 minutes here and there. You need to put him first and then work your schedule around it. I know that's hard, especially when you have a lot of things going on. But I know for a fact that this, like I said, this little point right here is temporary. And we're talking about eternity. And Christ is so much longer than this little bit. Your pain, what you're going through is hard, and I understand that. But we're hoping for the future, and your relationship with Christ needs to grow so you can be with him. Dear Lord, thank you for this day. Thank you for everything you've given us, God. Through pains, through struggles, through all sorts of stuff that goes on in our life, may we remember that you need to be the center of our lives. May we sit and listen at your feet, God. Yes, we have stuff in our lives. Yes, we can't forget that stuff, Lord. May we always come back to sitting at your feet and listening to you, because you are eternal and our relationship with you is eternal.